man, your contracts, your vehicles, they're all going to have different flavors. The services are going to have different flavors, right? So you got DIU and AFWERX Perspective. That's the flavor of their program. But we've got a great partner here at Capital Factory. Obviously, some of you who are in town know about Army Futures Command that showed up here a few years back to bring Army modernization to bear. And basically the execution arm of that is a great partner of ours, Army Applications Lab, doing some really great stuff. And they've got some really, really neat programs that they're doing in order to drive Army modernization. So I have Dr. Casey Perley. She's here. Please have a seat. Come on on in stage. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. So, let's talk a little bit about Army, what you guys, Army Applications Lab, your programs again, SBIR, SITR, how you guys look at that from your lens. And then tell us a little bit about yourself and your passions before you even get started.
Awesome. So my name is Dr. Casey Perley, as he said. I'm our Director of Insights and Analysis at Army Applications Lab. I have the best job in the lab because I get to work with all of our scientists and engineers and all of our corporate experts. So we evaluate the problems that we send out the door, make sure that they are suitable, feasible for small businesses to solve. Like, we're not going to be like, hey, please build the next tank. Yeah, we know you guys, not necessarily your wheelhouse, but you could totally build a great enabling technology or an enhancing technology for those capital platforms, right? Or something that might stand alone in a different part of the process for resupplying that vehicle or for maintaining that vehicle. We also then take a look at the companies that come in the door, take a look at the solutions, and then help you guys as you go along evaluating your process along with all the rest of our Army stakeholders. At AAL, we use SBIR, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, quite a bit. That makes up about 2/3 of our funding. And then we have some non-SBIR funding called RDT&E. That's Research, Development, Testing, and Evaluation money, specifically geared towards getting things to right around that min-viable product level. Realistically, what we do is we try to use that non-SBIR funds to accelerate and enhance our SBIR work. So if you guys have heard of Phase 3 SBIR, where you try to do that last little bit of development before you get ready to maybe hand it over to test and evaluation, that's really where we aim our RDT&E. Also, how do you plan for catastrophic success? So the bulk of our new projects that go out on the street do tend to be that SBIR work. Like the Air Force, we do Phase 1s, we do direct to Phase 2s, but we really have two sort of superpowers. The first is we embed you guys with end users where appropriate for the problems we're trying to solve, so that rather than just doing soldier touch points here and there, you're doing iterative design with the same group of end users who are providing consistent feedback, and you really get to understand the problem and the use case more than like parachuting in for a day or two and then leaving to go back home. The second is we have the ability to write requirements. And I know to you guys, you're like, what is that and why does that matter? So the Army writes requirements that tell us what capabilities the technology we want to acquire has. So our innovation successes and failures, we codify those in the requirements. The CG, the commanding general at AFC, signs them, right? So we can ensure that when we're finding really cool technology, we are making sure the Army is getting all of the right demand signals to bring it into that program of record, which is that long-term recurring revenue for companies. So it's a little bit about us, it's a little bit about me, and we're really happy to be here. We love being in Capital Factory, we love being in Austin.
Oh, I love that. Well, thanks for that quick overview. I mean, the most intriguing thing that I really like about Army Applications Lab, so you guys know Air Force, right? I bleed blue, and at first it's like we did take very, very different approaches to this. But, in contracting, kind of the world that I came from, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Right? So no one way is better than the other. They just meet specific needs. The strategies that we were using in the Air Force, we wanted to kind of create how do we create a buffet of different capabilities that we can then just pick from? Well, the Army is a little bit more direct. They're a little more succinct. They want to have that how do we create, basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that vehicle so that way there is success. How do you create a group, a teaming of folks, of talent, that then you can then provide some of that funding with, and then basically work with that team together to get it to fruition. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So we build stakeholder teams up front. So what that means is before we ever release a problem out the door, we have an end user. We have the people with the money who are able to buy it. It might not be for 2 or 3 years. but they're on board from the beginning. We have the relevant scientists, engineers, requirements writers, concept writers, all those people that we are going to need to get the technology across the finish line together as a team up front. They write the solicitation, they're involved in reviewing the proposals, all of that stuff we all do together. Rather than the Air Force that takes a much more what I call butterfly net approach. They're really good at finding technology we don't know we need because it doesn't exist. At AAL, we're much more laser focused on this is the capability we need. Show us all the different ways you can accomplish that. So to that end, we take very broad approaches. We're never going to say build us an autoloader. We're going to say help us fire faster, right? And a company could bring an inventory management solution to bear, or some sort of software solution that connects different artillery systems and makes them talk to each other so somebody's not using a whiteboard or a pen on paper in the rain when it's disintegrating, right? That's all going to enable that crew to fire faster. But if we just had built an autoloader, we never would have gotten that. Yeah. So that's kind of how we go about things.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it's just like, when we look at, again, going back to general contracting 101, right? Different ways to do stuff. We mentioned about no matter who you're going to partner with in DoD, federal government, local or state, you're going to have to deal with different, cultures on how they look at the problem, right? So Air Force, Navy, Space Force now, they're looking at problems, but through different lenses, right? So, so a lot of times I see a lot of people saying, hey, what's better, the Air Force? In fact, we had a gentleman just ask earlier here, is it better to do contracting with the Navy or the Air Force because, he's had experience with the Navy? I'm not going to say it's either one because every single service is looking at that problem set from a different lens, and they're creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to plug in the way that they can then fulfill that problem set and how they're looking at it through their lens. So could you tell us a little bit how are things evolving now in AL? What are the timelines that these entrepreneurs can see?
Absolutely. Although I will say, if you build capital warships like aircraft carriers, you definitely want to contract with the Navy, not the Army, not our bailiwick. Awesome. So what does it look like? So AAL, we really try to break down the barriers to entry that non-traditional companies face. And one of those is speed to capital. So I checked the numbers right before I came downstairs. So the time to contract for what we call our proof of concept awards, they tend to be $250K or less. Think of them like a phase 1 SBIR, although because we have different types of money, they don't necessarily have to be. We get on contract in about 45 days from submission close. So the first 2 weeks of that will probably be our review process. Then you're notified, and then probably about another 30 days until everybody signed that contract and you're starting work. We also, depending on the project, try to structure our payments so that you're not necessarily waiting until the end of that first month to invoice. We try to have a deliverable upfront. We recognize, especially if you are bending metal for a robotic arm or there is a critical soldier touch point on week 3 of the project, we want to minimize the amount of money you have to pay out of pocket and then wait to get reimbursed. So we want to try to accelerate payments to you when we can. When we're doing those, what we call min-viable products contracts, those are 500K or above type awards. Think of them like your SBIR phase 2s. Contracting is about 80 to 90 days from solicitation close. Once again, about the same time for down selection, but because the dollar value on the contract is larger, it just takes a little bit longer with our KOs to make sure all the due diligence is done and both sides, IP is protected where appropriate and both sides are okay with the agreement.
Yeah, so, when we talked about those, again, those go-to market strategies, very dependent on which innovation hub, what team you're going to put yourself against. So don't think that because you had an experience with the Air Force or the CSO from DIU, that all of a sudden it's going to be very much the same cut and dry, cut and paste, with Team Army. What you want to do is basically do a go-to market strategy that if you're going to plan, and obviously we always, as entrepreneurs, we plan to win, right? That there is those timelines that you want to take into account, because if you get in that pipeline, you're gonna be in those timelines. So make sure that your go-to market strategy takes into account those milestones, those timelines that each of the services put out for their programs, and make sure that you align yourself to that, going forward. Do you have anything?
I'm going to make a joke. We had a company that had done a lot of work with the Army that came on board in one of our projects, and they accidentally screwed themselves over because they didn't expect to move as fast as we said we would. We're like, we told you 45 days. We did it in 43. We're not that far off what we told you. But their experience had always been the 190, 224 day side of things. So they were like, you guys can't really do it in 45. So when service components tell you what their timeline is, like, believe it. We hold ourselves to that internally, but oftentimes there might be a critical soldier touch point, a critical design meeting, a critical conference that we want you to go to. And in order to make that happen, you got to be on contract, which, sets our timelines.
And that's one thing that I like about Army Applications Lab is, again, they're very prescriptive on how they do their projects. So they do. If you're in the pipeline and you make that pipeline, and they're like, okay, we're going to give that contract to you in 45 days, get ready. Hopefully you guys are communicating to them because you have another thing coming, for the next 45 days. So again, it's one of those things, guys, that and gals, as you kind of look at, you're working with the different DoD elements, different federal partners, even laboratories, everybody's going to have a little bit of nuance in their culture and how their program executes. And you've got to really listen and, really kind of read between the lines to understand what are the different nuances that is important to them and what's the battle rhythm that they're going to be on, and then try and line yourself to that. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money, right? And it also might, make you a little bit more efficient just because now you know what other activity you can be doing while maybe you're waiting on them, or what activity you can accelerate, right? Because they're going to move fast, so you can put your limited resources in the right spots where they need to be. So, I want to ask the audience. I mean, I know you have questions because I know a lot of you, some of you have worked. How many of you guys have actually worked with the U.S. Army or Army Applications Lab to any degree? Anybody? No?
I have one hand. So one hand.
One hand. Okay, cool. So that means most of you should have questions if you've never worked with Army.
So here's what I will say really quickly before we go to questions. The Army has a lot of different ways to do SBIR. And I really like that because it allows us to tailor the approach to the problem that is being solved. So not all Army SBIR timelines are our timelines, right? So when you apply to an Army SBIR, look and see who that sponsoring organization is. If it says Spartan AAL, it's us. If it says ASALT, that's a great office out of the Pentagon in DC that's executing, and they're going to have their own slightly different timelines. But you know what? If you take one of those technical point of contact calls or you go to one of their webinars, they're going to tell you their timelines, right? And if you're doing one that is labeled DevCom, right, they're going to have their own set of timelines. Just ask what they are. It's just because all the organizations are looking to get different things out of their program. So for AAL, we often prioritize speed, but others are going to prioritize different things that might affect their timelines a little bit. But it doesn't mean that one of them is better than another. They're just getting after different problems and using different approaches.
Something that's really interesting, it's like you got DEFCON, you have ASALT, you've got Spartan AL.
DevCom is our centers and labs. So those are the Army scientists. They're doing everything from basic research, how do we get ready for 2050, to actually integrating the next gen combat vehicle in a lab in Warren, Michigan, right? When we say ASALT is the buyers. Those are the people that go out and actually own the congressional budget, own the procurement funds, own those program of record dollars. So, and AFC works really in that basic research to min viable product stage.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's exactly what I was going to ask. It's like you have these different organizations. Is there a place where the teams can actually look at the different organizations to understand kind of where they're at, maybe where they can plug themselves into, because obviously...
That would be great.
Yeah, because some of these guys, you don't want them they're early stage and they go to ASALT. ASALT's going to be like, I'm going to close the door on you. So how can we do that? Or is there a site?
That would be a really great resource to have.
Okay.
We don't have that right now, unfortunately. What I can say is if you go to the Army Application Lab website, aal.army, you can certainly see everything we're working on, and you'll see our timelines and the maturity level we're looking for in technology. Sometimes we're looking for ideas, sometimes we're looking for, you should probably already have some of this kind of built existing in the commercial space and pivoting in. But you'll get a really good sense based on the timelines we're looking for, what that maturity should be. Army.SBIR is another great website that has all of the SBIR topics from AAL, from the buyers in ASALT, from the labs in DevCom. And once again, they're going to be pretty explicit about the technology readiness level they're looking at. If you don't know what technology readiness levels are, they're this thing the government uses to try to tell us how mature a product is on a scale of 1 to 9. They're fuzzy, to be honest, right? If you're like, I'm between a TRL3 and TRL4, yeah, sure, but yes, there's a lot of gray area, right? You don't binarily move from 3 to 4. Recommend a Google search and looking up what they are. TRL1 is basic research. TRL6 is like min viable product type level. TRL9 is I am in the field, ready to go, completely integrated on Army networks, Army platforms, everything, right? So I would say definitely find like a graphic on Google. I didn't bring one today, unfortunately. That's very helpful. Take a look at where you think you are. If you're earlier on that side, more DevCom. If you're a little bit later, probably more ASALT, more that buyer side. But sometimes the Army's not really good at translating ourselves to industry, and we'll be very silly and write, we're looking for TRL4. We're going to get you to TRL6. And you're like, I don't know what that means. Yeah, that's on us. It's not on you. But I can't change the way the whole Army works. I can only change the way my portion of the Army works. So quick Google on technology readiness levels is probably useful as well.
Okay, so in kind of lay terms, when you look at the Army Applications Lab Spartan program, where on the technology level you guys really, what's your sweet spot?
Within 6 months to 3 years with us, you are going to reach min viable product, what we call TRL6 complete. That means if you are making a microphone widget that's like standalone, at the end of that timeline, you give me the microphone and I say thank you. If you are building a sensor that is going to tank, at the end of 3 years, we will help you get it integrated on a tank. So when we say complete, it means either integrated or standalone based on the technology, 6 to 36 months from the time you come on board with us. Timelines are really determined by unit needs, program of record needs. So if a program of record has funding coming in 2 years, we need you to be ready in 2 years so you're ready to go into the budget when it's there, right? Or if a unit really needs the technology for a rotation they're going on in 18 months, we're going to need that technology, because we have our end user stakeholder team lined up front, that drives our maturation timeline. And if we only have 6 months, you probably got to come in on the little bit more mature side than if we have 3 years, right?
So you could almost, that's really interesting because to this group, when you do get on an Army contract, there's a little bit more certainty as to what the outcome's going to be. They really want you to plug in and get to the certain level so you can actually get fielded. And hopefully, we talked about, again, appropriations, right? She's talking about, hey, I got 2 years. They're actually going to line you up, right, somewhere where they know that yes, you're successful. We're going to get that appropriation to scale. We're going to get that O&M, and then we're going to start fielding you. So that's really interesting. So, but you don't do the quantity. Let's just be clear.
Oh, no.
You don't do quantity.
We
you're doing
don't
more.
Scale.
You're more like quantity. You're more like quality.
A little bit.
Explain to them a little bit, because you don't do the number of, for example, cyber contracts that Air Force do in quantity. So explain the nuance there between mass quantity and then yours, which is a little bit more finite.
So a couple of things. One, we're also not going to scale you at AAL. So we're going to get you to that min viable product, and we'll probably need enough to go to a squad, a platoon, a battalion, whatever level in the Army is going to use your product. We want to get enough for one of those units to have them, play with them, try them, maybe take them to the National Training Center on a rotation where they go to train against a professional opposing force, right? So that the Army can make an informed decision. But once that decision is made and they say, yes, we want this and we've got the funding lined up in the budget, we will then hand you off to the buyers who will take you through testing, your prototype, your manufacturing readiness, all of that stuff to fielding at scale. We really stop at that min viable product. Also, you're right, we don't have the scale the Air Force does. Army Applications Lab has been around 3 years and we have about 100 portfolio companies. Okay. We also bring on multiple solvers per project, typically. So it's not uncommon for us to bring on, for our min viable product projects, between 2 to 5 solvers who are all taking different technological approaches. Sometimes the technologies are complementary, and those companies may elect of their own accord to sign NDAs and work together to make a little bit more of a complete system. For some of our projects that start at that proof of concept stage, specific thinking specifically of our autoloader work, how do we make that field artillery fire faster? We brought on 15 companies that all had different subcomponents, and that 15 then went down to 5. And there is a decision point that the program manager, so the buyer guy who's in charge of buying things for field artillery will have in fiscal year 24, so about 2 years from now, to say, these are the ones that I want to bring forward, right? The answer could be 0. If none of them work, the answer could be 4 if a lot of them work and they interface well together.
That's really interesting. So, when these guys are bringing these teams together, she mentioned they brought in 15 for that artillery, now they're down to 5. Maybe it ends up with those 5s actually become the supply chain. So when you talk about a full system program, when you talk about, I'm going to talk airplanes, right? Because that's what I know.
That's what you know.
You know how many suppliers are when you're building an F-35? There's hundreds, right? If not sometimes thousands if you go really deep, right? There's tons of suppliers. So when you go into this Army program, yes, it's less in quantity, but you're going to be, what you want to do is get into that system, be those 15, and hopefully stay in the game to become that 5, that then later is like, okay, now you're outfitting, you're part of that kind of coalition, that joint venture, so to speak, of those suppliers that are going to provide that end product to a specific mission set for the Army. So I could almost see, so you guys are doing a lot of the fire faster and the loading. Are there any other areas that you guys are really looking at and where can we find that information?
So we have 5 main technology verticals that we work with in AAL. The first is a new one for us. I'm going to start with our new one. We're beginning to really move into the contested logistics space. So how do you do logistics forward? How do you do logistics under fire? Even, I'm going to use a Navy example because for as much grief as I give the Navy, they are our sister, right? In World War II, do you know that they would resupply a battleship in under 24 hours at sea? All the food, all the fuel, everything, in the water, in storms, right? We haven't had to do that as a country in a long time. But those contested logistics operations are going to be owned by the Army, wherever they occur. So, okay, that's a new focus area for us that we're really interested in. We're interested in power and energy, everything from electric vehicles to installation, infrastructure to better batteries on soldiers. We're interested in tactical AI and autonomous systems. And we're interested in, what is our last one that I'm embarrassingly missing? Human performance.
That's right.
So how do we optimize human performance? I'm not talking about things like supplements here, but how do we get better data back to our leaders so they can make the most informed decision on what units are ready to go on missions? How do we make that soldier better, faster, stronger by improving how they work out and how they train, knowing that they have a knee injury? Right? So how do we make sure that they're getting all the fitness they need while protecting that knee and rehabbing that knee? So we're looking at all those things. And then we have a 5th area called emerging opportunities. How do we, 1, capitalize on success? And 2, what are those technologies that by virtue of their existence could either be so timely or change the character of warfare when they kind of walk through our door that we're like, that doesn't fit in a line of effort, but we should probably work on that. So we have that little bit of a catch-all bucket there.
I'm going to give you a quick little point. I mean, that's super exciting because I know Vertex Human Performance.
Yes, it's coming in December.
Coming, right? December.
Coming in December. So that's a reverse industry day, right? Where we bring all of the critical leaders across the Army. We just did this for power in the springtime. To industry. And we'd say to industry, where are you right now? We tell you the challenges we have. You tell us what you're working on, where you see the field going, so we can, 1, start to shape our own planning processes better. We can shape our requirements, those things that drive acquisitions better. And then also, ideally, we can start to shape solicitations, things that go out to industry and say, hey, we're working on this. If you have a solution, here's a pathway to funding. So we're doing about 2 Vertexes a year. Our last one was Vertex Energy. Our next one in December is going to be Vertex Human Performance.
Yeah, and that's basically, guys, a sneak peek. So if you're into human performance stuff or anything that kind of deals with that, be part of that, because once you're part of the sneak peek, you've got time to prepare for what's coming, which is ultimately a requirement and a solicitation that you can answer to. So be part of that, because this is your opportunity to actually help inform what that could look like. Obviously, like you're saying, the Army doesn't know everything.
We don't.
So they need to rely on entrepreneurs to really kind of bring that
We
together.
don't even like to pretend we know everything anymore. We admit that we don't.
Yeah, which is an awesome place to be. So I know we're about to wrap up here. Any questions from the crowd here for Casey? Right here. Larry, go ahead.
You kind of
Yeah.
I'm here today not as an entrepreneur, but as an investor, and I'm very interested in dual use.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is there a channel of
Yes.
collaboration with a venture firm like mine
Absolutely.
to share that knowledge back and forth?
So
What do we
we
need and what do we have?
we have a VC newsletter that we send out about once a month. So if you are a portfolio company of ours and you are having a raise, we share that there. We also share areas where we're conducting market research. So we can't like pre-release a topic to you guys. I can't be like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we're about to work on teleporters, right? But I can go out to industry and say, I'm really interested in any technology that has to do with like wearable sensors. What do you have? Where do you see the field going? What do you see costs to be? So we share that with our venture capitalists. We also share company highlights. And we're definitely, adversarial capital is a big problem in general. Like if we want to work with companies that are doing well, those are companies that are often raising, and we need to make sure that their capital isn't, connected back 6 ways to China that could potentially compromise technologies of national importance. So we really are working with investors that, are self-certifying that their capital is clean to the best of their knowledge. So we should definitely connect, and I will give you the email address of our venture person to get in touch with.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yep.
Unfortunately not. Nor are we about to work on jetpacks, UFOs, or any of those other things.
Or are you?
No, we're not.
I think we had one over here. No? All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up because we
Awesome.
got just a little bit more to go.
Yeah, thank you
Please,
so much.
I'd love for you to stay tuned. In a little bit, we're going to have, again, stay here for free beer. And get the Army team to come down here because I know they like beer.
I would love that,
Okay.
but I have a 5-month-old I've got to go pick up
Okay.
from daycare.
All right.
So
Okay.
I'm going to hang around for about 15 minutes if anybody's got questions. And then after that, there's a small pterodactyl who needs
Yes.
needs me to pick her
Well,
up.
we'll spread the word. Get the other Army guys down
All right,
here.
I'll try to
All
get
right.
the other Army guys.